Hello, everyone. Welcome back to another episode of the HR Leaders Podcast, the show where we explore the future of work with industry experts and HR executives from the world's leading global brands. Today, we're joined by Mike Rudd, who's a Senior Vice President and Chief HR Officer at Option Care Health. Welcome to the show, Mike. How are you?
I'm great, Chris. How are you doing?
Not too bad, not too bad. Things have gone pretty crazy in the world since we last spoke. So apart from that, I'm all good. How are you holding up?
Everything's going fine. I think, the getting used to the podcasts and the Zoom meetings and the WebExes, along with balancing that with everything going on at your home when your kids are around and the dogs are barking and the like. But otherwise, it's all good.
Have you had any of the kids gate crash the show?
No, I haven't. My kids are older, so I think they're off doing their own thing. So I don't have little ones running around like you do that may crash the meeting.
Yeah. How is it with because most of the people I'm speaking to are very young kids? How is it with more older kids? Are they just very content to be in their own space? And
very much so. Sometimes you don't know you don't see them for hours and hours at a time, so you have to go pry them out of their room and make sure that they're doing things. But
it's the opposite problem then. It's like, Dad, leave me alone.
Absolutely. So privacy is usually not the issue with older kids.
No, do I have to come down for dinner?
Exactly.
We're not there yet. With Robin, it's a full-time gig right now, every minute of the day between me and my wife, Natasha.
I can remember those days.
Yeah, but before we jump in, tell us a bit more about yourself personally and your journey to where we are today.
Yeah. So I 35 years of career in human resources, from training and development to broader generalist roles. And I've spent most of my career in life sciences and healthcare companies. A personal attraction to that. It's from a mission perspective, as far as the giving back. Those kinds of industries are really attractive to me. So in global companies, public companies, private equity firms as well, and now here with Option Care Health, which is a home infusion therapy services company based in the U.S., and it's a U.S.-based U.S. business. We're not outside the United States, but just a lot of experiences with different companies, looking at culture change, looking at HR transformations to help drive those culture changes within organizations. And it's exciting work. I enjoy doing it. And I guess that's probably why I stayed in it this long.
Yeah. Well, 35 years, not to age you or anything, but that's older than me.
Yeah, well,
so you definitely love it.
Yes.
What really stood out in our first conversation was how passionate you were around culture change and transformation. In particular, before we kind of jump in more detail to each of those areas, why are you so passionate about culture and HR transformation?
When you think about the impact organizational culture has on people's lives, and what I believe is the moral obligation that companies and managers have. And I always use this example. Ask people, how many times have you gone home, sat around the dinner table, and either complained about your boss or complained about the company, or you had a great experience and you're really positive? So company culture doesn't turn off, when you come home. You spend so much of your time at work, more time than sleeping, more time than your family. I think as leaders of an organization, we have a moral obligation to make sure that the environment that our people are in, the interactions and the relationships that people have, are positive. I don't want to be that person, and I don't want my company to be that company that people are going home complaining to their spouses, to their kids, about how crummy the work environment is, how crummy my boss is, because that affects and infects your whole life. I think it's critical that companies focus on culture because it touches and influences everything, and it's clearly a precursor to outstanding performance. And in any organization, ultimately, that's what we've got to deliver. We've got to deliver outstanding performance. And why I love HR, been in it for 35 years, is I think we're in the middle of everything. And if you have the right HR organization, then you can help shape and influence all of that culture work. And for me personally, that's what kind of fills my bucket and gets me jazzed, is the ability to, go into all aspects of the organization, but have a meaningful positive impact on the organization that really affects people's lives. And that for me kind of sums it up.
Yeah, no, definitely very, very, very important. When people ask you, Mike, what is culture? Because I love asking this question because I get so many different answers from so many different CHROs. So I'm just putting you on the spot.
Yeah.
What is culture? Someone says to you, Mike, what does culture mean? What is culture?
Well, I think it's not just one thing. It's a whole host of things that shape what it's like to work in that organization. I think it starts first and foremost. I think it starts with leadership and who the leaders within the organization are, the values that they ascribe to, the ways in which they behave, the ways in which they communicate across the organization. And again, words are great. It's the actions though. So making sure that you have leaders that are engaged with and demonstrating behaviors that you want within the organization. But it's also about articulating what are the values, what are the things that are most important of how we work in this organization, what gets rewarded, what doesn't. And I think if you want a quick litmus test on, if you're going into an organization to better understand the values, what do people get rewarded for, and what do they not? Who gets promoted or not? And what do those people do? And what do they like? And who doesn't? And that gives you a flavor of what's important in that the values of the organization. But then it's how they work together. It's how decisions are made, and it's how people's performance is evaluated. I think all of that stuff lends itself to this recipe, this kind of mix of behaviors and things that are articulated that help drive and develop an organization's culture.
What are some of the challenges you've seen in the organizations then, cultural challenges that you've faced?
Some of the challenges, I think, at the start are whether the organization sees the need to change. First of all, I grew up and learned a very simple formula around change that I think is relevant in a whole host of areas. And it's kind of a very simple formula. First and foremost, you have to have dissatisfaction in the status quo, right? If you're not dissatisfied, if you like what's going on, regardless of how great people talk about it, there's not going to be a change. So first you have to have dissatisfaction. And so every once in a while, people are happy, people are kind of settled with how things are because change requires effort. And some people don't like that. I think the next thing, you have to have a model of the future, right? So you just can't be dissatisfied. So great, I got a bunch of people who don't like the current situation. But what's that model of the future need to look like? What could it be? What could it, and could it be better? And then how do we get there? So the dissatisfaction, the model of the future, and then the process for the change. And it's a multiplicative formula. So if any one of those things is zero, nothing happens. And all of that change, all of that dynamic, the dissatisfaction, the model of the future, the process has to be greater than the pain of change. Because all change is painful. It takes effort. People get used to their ways. And so you really need to articulate that first. And I think taking an assessment of that before you go into any kind of organizational change, then you're on the right track.
Yeah, really, very, really interesting. I just wanted to go back for a second because Patrick on LinkedIn said he'd love to hear your thought, Mike, on the effect that doing good, i.e. volunteering, can have on the company's culture. Want to hear your thoughts around that?
Well, and I think it's great, and I think though it's even more impactful if it aligns with your company's purpose. So, for example, at Option Care Health, as a healthcare company, our purpose is providing extraordinary care that changes lives. More and more people are realizing that people are coming into work wanting their own personal purpose aligned with a company's purpose, right? And so if the values of the company align with my values, I'm going to be more engaged. I'm going to give more discretionary work. If the company supports things like volunteering, that's important to me, then I'm going to be more aligned with the organization. But I think companies need to be very purposeful, though, about that. You just can't throw out certain activities and allow employees just to go do that without the company supporting that. So I think it has to be both, as long as it's aligned with. And I think that's the key point. If I'm going to reward people or encourage people to do days of giving or days of care, those kinds of things, if it's aligned with our company purpose, it makes it even more impactful, I think.
Yeah, no, I completely agree. And that's becoming more important now than ever.
Very.
One of the reasons why I left my previous company to start this business is I kind of kept getting up and going to work every day. And then got to the point where I was like, why am I doing what I'm doing? Yes,
Right.
I'm making great money. I've got a great role, stable job. But I kind of just was like, I remember seeing the Simon Sinek Golden Circle to start with why. I watched that on my lunch break at work. And I was like, I can't even answer the question of what is my why. I've been here for 10 years in this company, and I could not tell you what the why is of the business or personally why I'm here. And I couldn't get that out of my head.
Right.
Every day I was doing my hour-long commute to work, and I was like, why am I doing this? If it's just for money, which it just really, that's what it was. And the fact I enjoyed my team, I enjoyed spending time with my team. I had a great team. But outside of that, it didn't align with any of my real core values and why. And I just couldn't get over that to the point where I left.
Exactly. Well,
company.
Well, and back when I started a long time ago, it was a very different sense of work, and that the simple dynamic of relocations, right? Companies would move people around all over the place, disrupt the families, move them around because I needed to do that. Now, I can tell you, in the last several companies I've been at, we may find some great leaders that we want to expand, but they're unwilling to move because of the lifestyle that they have, the family disruption of kids in school, and the like. And people are staying truer to their own sense to, as you said, why am I doing this? My own personal purpose. And if companies don't get on board with that and don't figure out a way to link their own company purpose with individuals, they're going to be on the short end of the stick finding the right talent, because and this pandemic is proving one thing, and it's interesting. Companies can perform virtually.
Yeah, but it took the pain, like you said earlier, right?
That's right. Exactly. And I'll tell you, there's, in our company, there's certain roles that cannot be performed remotely because they're pharmacists and pharm techs who are actually compounding drugs. But we had billing center people. We had other roles that historically you have to be in an office. Well, in 4 weeks, we moved everybody in those roles to be virtual. And now you realize that business keeps going. You can still perform, which creates a whole different dynamic then when you attract people back to this whole, am I aligning you with your purpose, with the organization's purpose? Because now you don't have to be physically located in a particular area to work for a company, and it still works. So how do I attract those people to the organization? And so I think that companies got to get on board with that.
Yeah. Obviously, with this new global talent marketplace that we're in now, it's very interesting.
Yes.
Super interesting. I'm doing a lot of work on it with a number of CHROs right now. What are your thoughts on it personally as a CHRO, and also both the opportunities, but also linking it back to transformation and culture? How do you onboard someone and make them become part of a culture when they've never even walked in the office before or met you, the team, and everything else? Because that's typically what embodies the culture, is the workplace environment, the interactions. How do you do that remotely? Have you thought about that?
We've thought about that. I would be the first one to tell you we don't have all the answers to that one. And so I welcome anybody, all of your viewers, to share any additional information. I think clearly the upside from a talent acquisition perspective is I'm no longer bound by a geographic location. And so if somebody has internet access and you're in the UK, I'm here in the United States, we're having this conversation, it's going, it's very effective. So you can tap into talent just about anywhere, which is phenomenal from an employer perspective. I'm not bound by that geography. The challenge is back to this whole idea of culture, is how do I embed, how do I ingrain, how do I assimilate and indoctrinate that idea, that culture that often comes from interacting with my bosses, seeing a CEO do a town hall meeting, or just be walking around a facility to get the feel for that. And so it's really challenging us to think about better technology. So you've got to be able to onboard and align people quickly through technology to make it seamless. But I think it's also putting more pressure on managers in how they connect with people. And I think that's the critical piece. Culture has always been, and engagement has always been, a frontline issue. It's nice to have the CEO give these wonderful, waxing philosophical, town hall meetings. At the end of the day, it's that frontline manager who has the most impact on engaging that team member, making sure they're trained appropriately, making sure they understand the organizational values and the norms and the like. But we've got to find ways, and we're looking at new ways to communicate with people that are more modern. So it's the Facebook-like kind of, Instagram kind of communication internally that connects with people. It's more frequent communication with folks, and again, at least in our situation, there are opportunities to bring people together or where they work. We've obviously got to be careful now with social distancing and the safety measures of that, to figure out ways to do that. But what keeps me up at night is, how do you have these truly differentiating cultures, the thing that you can't replicate in other places, when it's all remote? And that's still something I'm working on with our organization. And again, it still comes back to that manager. But at the end of the day, and it's kind of like the function, human resources, and we're all humans. There's this interaction, there's this social nature, I think, that's critical, that technologies just sometimes can't replicate. So I'm still working on it.
That's my concern, because we're doing the virtual coffee hours, the virtual one-on-ones, but it just doesn't feel the same. And so I was saying to my team only this morning about that, is that we're struggling as a small team.
Yeah.
I can only even imagine companies with thousands of employees who are onboarding hundreds of, there are companies out there right now onboarding, even during a pandemic, in retail, for example.
Tens of thousands
of people. How do you bring those people into the organization and build a bond, a relationship with your line manager virtually? You've never seen that as well. And you're all right. We do need to provide more support for those line managers, because they've never managed in this context before either.
No, most of them haven't.
It's hard. I can tell you right now, it's difficult and there's no playbook.
Exactly. There's no playbook. And also some of the rules that I think existed before. So simple things like, what can you talk about with your employees during their one-on-one sessions? Now people are encouraging, ask them about what's going on with their family. Ask them how it's going with the kids, and how are you how are you managing this challenging work-life balance kinds of issues, where before, let's stay focused on work. But now it's actually almost the opposite with that. The other thing I challenge, and not to get off on a different tangent related to this, mental wellness, I think, is going to be a huge challenge for organizations going forward, because I think this is really challenging. As you said, people are having a challenge, are being challenged, not interacting with people, not being able to get out. And we've already seen the issues of mental well-being and mental health are going to be higher on the priority list, I think, for organizations, for their teams going forward.
Yeah, well, when we surveyed our CHRO community before this, it was number one on many of their agenda before the pandemic.
Yeah.
So now, it's kind of, that's now escalated to a whole nother level. But it was already number one. A lot of the CEOs we work with, health and well-being was right up there. But now this has happened as well. It's something that we all need to keep a close eye on, and that's why it's even more important to start your meetings with that question of, how are you?
Yeah.
But with genuine intent, not because you've been told to ask how are you, and be empathetic. And many managers aren't used to having those type of conversations. I would say that I've gotten to know some of my employees and some of my friends and even family better during this pandemic than I have ever before, because we're taking the time to just forget about all the media hype and everything going on. Just say, how are you?
Yeah. Chris, I think that also in part relates back to what you were saying before. And when we were talking about individual purpose and your individual why, if the manager and the company is connecting more with you at a different level to better understand you as a whole person, why work is important to you, how this plays into your total well-being, I think it connects and resonates better with employees. So I think people welcome it. There's always, you have to be somewhat careful on certain areas with that. But I think in general, as you said, if there's good intent and there's a decent sense of empathy, or at least listening and understanding, which is sometimes difficult with some folks, I think people will be able to get through it. But it's a whole different set of rules than it was 10 years ago. Completely.
I'm just hoping that it continues after this. I was always told in my old job that, I was a very traditional business. I'm not going to mention the name, but they're not your friends, Chris, not your family. You're they're your employees. You're their manager. Because I was always, the manager of, having a real close bond relationship with my team members.
Yeah.
All of those those team members in the organization I'm referring to now work for me in HR, with me in HR leaders, because we have built such a strong bond that when I said, look, I'm quitting and go out on this journey to build this business, they were the first people that said, we're with you.
We're with you.
We're with you. Let's do this. I'm like, whoa, okay. You believe it there? And, if I was just a manager and not a leader to them, they wouldn't do that as well. So I couldn't imagine even working in a business where I didn't have that type of relationship with my team.
Well, right. Well, and it used to be, I mean, the in management training, it used to, or as they said to people, I don't have to like people. I just have to respect them. Okay, you're going to spend a third of your life around people you don't like. You may respect them. It's funny. I always, whenever I come in a new organization, and it always kind of surprises people at times, I'll do town halls, whatever, and I talk about the 5% jerk rule.
The 5%?
5% jerk rule. And everybody's always looking, oh my gosh, the HR guy's talking about something like this. And I say, look, think about it. probably 5% of the people you interact with on a day in and day out basis at work are jerks. And they detract from your enjoyment of work. They detract from the value of the organization. 95% of the people are there, want to do a good job, have great positive intent. Maybe they need a little help on figuring out how to do that, but they're there to support and do the right thing, right? So the best thing from a culture perspective we can do is find those 5% and get rid of them. So it's not this, I need to respect you, but I don't need to like you. It's like, if I don't enjoy being around you for these various reasons, and because it's not an enjoyable experience, then that's not a good thing. And we've got to figure that out. And so, again, I always joke, you may have 5%, you may have 10% jerk rules in your organization. I don't know, but it is about who you interact with. It's about who you work with. And to your point earlier, and it's also because people are aligned with the same purpose and the same values that I have that are going to make me want to work at Option Care Health or at any other organization, because they're people that are like me with the same kind of value set that I have.
Yeah, I love that 5% jerk rule. And I was just thinking, in terms of companies, making sure companies act, and is you have those jerks that in the businesses, some of them are actually the best performers. In terms of sales, right? So you might have, I'm sure everyone listening has probably got that sales guy or that person in the team who's, over delivering all the numbers, but it's just from a cultural perspective, working in a team is just an absolute nightmare.
Well,
and then you get businesses that kind of overlook that because they bring in the revenue or they generate amount of value, and that's a real true test.
Right. I mean, the stories of GE back in the day, the GE had the performance values 2x2 matrix, right? Yeah. And if you're hitting your numbers, but you're horrible on the values, you were out. And I think, people in organizations watch, and this goes back to you talking, the drivers of culture, leadership and accountability first and foremost. So they're watching. So there's Joe, who is killing it on the numbers, but nobody wants to work with him. He's disrespectful to customers. He does anything to get his numbers straight. And they're looking, okay, management, is that the behavior you want? Or is there something else? And I think the right companies are going to say, Joe, you can go do that someplace else. We'll find somebody else who can hit the numbers. But in the long run, aligning with the right behaviors is the right thing. But you're absolutely right, Chris. That is a litmus test.
Yeah. Before, my team will know who I'm referring to, and Ivan as well, maybe. We had a situation like that in my previous organization, and I was not allowed to actually fire a certain individual because he was generating so much revenue. And this is really bad, but I'll say it. I waited until the senior management team were away on holidays and the HR team was out to fire this individual. And it was really, because my entire team was looking at me to say,
right,
it's really, this is what we represent, and they're all looking at me as a leader to say, you're going to just let this continue because of numbers. But then on the other end, I had my entire leadership saying, no, you can't do that. And I took a decision. So you know what? I would rather risk my job and let this person go,
right,
than actually look at my team in the morning and say, this is okay behavior. This is who we are.
Because what happens also is then all the good people that are watching your behavior, if you do the wrong behavior, the good people leave. The rest of the 5% jerks stay, right?
They're more empowered. They're more empowered at that point. Long story short, luckily I didn't get fired after that.
I'm glad to hear that.
I'm being very scared when making that decision. But it was, and a lot of the CHROs I speak to, like yourself, I always ask them, what's some of the sort of keys to your success? And sometimes a lot of times actually they say, Chris, people don't really talk about it, but you have to be willing to put your own job on the line to do what's right.
I had a great job. Completely agree. I had a great mentor early in my career, very early in my career, and he told me, he said, look, in HR, you need to be willing to get fired. You have to. There are times, and unfortunately, I've had several times where you've gone into the boss's office and said, this is wrong. This is what needs to happen. And if it doesn't, I'm not sure this is a place I can be, because it's not just an individual decision how it affects me, but the message you're communicating to the rest of the organization, the impact it's going to have. And you have to have that courage of conviction. And hopefully it doesn't come up too often. But every now and then you gotta kind of have to check your career at the door a little bit and recognize that those situations come up. Yep.
Yeah, and I know a few CHROs right now that were actually let go by their organizations because they were trying to do what right by their people during this pandemic.
Really?
And their businesses were just not willing to, and they said, "Fine, I'm going to walk away." And it's just commend them for doing so and standing by. This is the right thing to do.
Yeah.
Yes, it may not be the best, ideal for the business, and we may lose a bit of revenue, but this is the right thing to do. And those businesses chose revenue over the right thing to do.
Right. Well, and I think that's a critical discussion HR leaders need to have with the executive teams when they're looking at culture. And you really need to pressure test the leaders to see where do we collectively stand on these things. And so it's nice to be able to talk about company values and purpose, and it's all, it's academic. But then when you start to pressure test and say, okay, so let's talk about accountability, or let's talk about this value of integrity. Okay, to your example, Joe is killing it on the numbers, but he's doing all these other bad things. What are we going to do? And it has to be this no kidding around discussion, because every now and then those kinds of things are going to happen. And if you haven't talked that through, and if you're not clear about, from a values and a purpose and a culture perspective, where the executive team is going to behave, then it's incumbent upon the CHROs to make sure that they've had those discussions with people to make sure that the answers are going to be right.
Yeah. On that point, then, what are sort of the economic advantages of an effective culture?
Well, I think first and foremost is you're able to attract and keep great talent. Because at the end of the day, I truly believe that is the differentiator. There are other home infusion companies out there. There are other product companies out there that can do similar types of things. What's attracting the better talent to your organization, and more importantly, what's keeping them there within it? Just turnover alone, and the costs of turnover and that churn can kill an organization. And it can be devastating if you're constantly bringing in people into the organization and there's a hole in the bucket because everybody's leaving. Your intellect, your company knowledge, your institutional knowledge, your customer knowledge walks out the door. And it's difficult to put a price on that. So culture, I mean, there is a definite ROI, and it's a precursor. It's a leading indicator. I think you get it's that discretionary effort that you get with highly engaged teams, that allow people to say, you know what, it's 5:30, I got to go home, but that new patient just called at 5:20, right? And it's going to take me another hour to get that patient set up, but it's the right thing to do, and I'm going to give that discretionary effort, and I'm going to call home, say I'm going to be late. But I do that because I believe in what I'm doing. I feel supported by my manager and my organization to do that, and it's valued in the organization. And that's culture. It's unfortunate in our litigious environment right now. Again, another thing I always joke about is, we've got this 50-page employee handbook, and I need 50 pages because I have to list out every single thing, because unfortunately in the litigious environment, oftentimes I'm managing to the 5%, not the 95%, right? So I have to have all these things. I always like to say, look, here are the values, here are expected leader behaviors, okay? Operate, and if you behave, 9 times out of 10, if you behave that in ways that's aligned with these values or these leader behaviors, you're going to do the right thing. Or if for some reason it didn't turn out right, we can correct that. But you did it with positive intent. But nowadays, it's this 50-page manual that I've got to kind of work through to figure out, in this situation, what do I do? And that's killing. If that's the kind of culture an organization has, run. You need to, as you live through with those values, those expected leader behaviors, and it's more than just words. That I think is the marks of a great culture. And I think, again, gets to that discretionary effort and allows those organizations to outperform.
Yeah, I agree. Talking about discretionary effort, we HR Leaders as you know, before this happened, we were an events business. That's where 80% of our revenue came from. That disappeared overnight. Right. And I kind of got the team together and said, what are we going to do? Right. Let's, I don't have any magical answers. Let's discuss as a team, how are we going to get through this? And I can only say, to Ivan, everyone listening on a team, that they went above and beyond to help us pivot the business, get up and running, launch new products, and deliver more value to the HR community within days.
Yes.
And they work day and night, not because I asked them to, but because they wanted to.
Right.
And they believed in our mission and what we was doing. And, they could have done the 9 to 5 and I would have been, that's fine. But they all went above and beyond during this time, a time where there's more uncertainty, more stress at home, at work, everywhere, right? They went above and beyond. And that literally turned into revenue. We had one of our biggest sales months we've had in the entire year, the month after, because of the team and that discretionary effort, which was unbelievable.
Right.
Even now, we kind of was, we had our first summit, as you know, 2 weeks ago. We had 5,000 HR executives attending. We built that in 2 weeks.
Right.
There's no way I would have been able to done that without the team going above and beyond and doing double the amount of work that they were being paid for.
And think about that. First and foremost, Chris, hats off to you. You had to create that environment and that sense of belonging with the team in order for them to want to do that, right? So first, hats off to you to do that. But then also think about kind of the force multiplier. As the leader, you didn't have to come up with all the ideas. In fact, it sounds like you didn't. The rest of the team did. They're more committed to those ideas. They're more committed to making sure those ideas go from just an idea to actual reality, right? And it truly is a force multiplier. If the leadership can create that discretionary effort for the team, I'm not saying you sit back and let everything happen, but there's a wave of new ideas, efforts, because those are the people that are doing it day in and day out. They know better how the work gets done or how the work can be improved, right? And if you're tapping into those people, it's phenomenal. But if you're not tapping into those people, think about those organizations where you've just got a bunch of people who have quit and stayed in their organization, right? And they're just waiting for the orders to come on from on high. Leaders aren't going to be able to drive the business if they need to. So yours is a great example of what that can do if you've got the right culture there.
Yeah. what are some of the skills and lessons learned that you had during other HR transformations or business transformations you led in the past that are now helping you during this crisis that you could share with everyone? Because a lot of principles are still the same regardless of the situation.
Yeah, I think there's a couple that I think we've done well, and I think a couple that we probably missed on and learned the hard way on this. First and foremost, it's communication, but it's communicating the why. So I'll go back to our very beginning of the discussion around that change formula and needing to make sure that there's dissatisfaction. You need to communicate why we're changing, what's the rationale, what's going to be different, and why is that better for our customers, in our case, our patients, and you have to tell that story over and over again, because people may not necessarily agree with the particular change that's happening, but at least if they can understand why we're doing this, then it also helps them take action aligned with that purpose and that rationale for doing it. So communicating, over communicating, and I think a lesson learned is actually setting up more of a formal communication channel, figuring that out, set up regular cadence of communication, vary it up from the CEO to the line managers to other functional leaders. Like I said, in today's world, it's technology and how can I connect them? So there's a communication app that we implemented within the organization that allows teams to create their own little communities, but we can communicate quickly with folks. So I think that's communication is critical. I think there's also, if you're going to sustain the change, having a regular cadence around with the key decision makers on a regular basis and it is paramount, because things come up on a weekly basis, particularly when you're going through organizational transformation and change, decisions that have to be made on that, getting the right people in the room who can make decisions quickly so it doesn't have to go up to 5 different committees to get resolved. And so we have a weekly meeting of those individuals, and we've had it since we've gone through this merger integration transformation last August. So from August 2019, at least within Option Care Health in this situation, to today, we have weekly meetings that are going through with all the right people, and we'll probably do that for a year for the change. So I think that's a critical piece. Obviously, you've got to get the right people in the right roles quickly. And so we spent a lot of time upfront assessing, evaluating, talking to, interviewing all the leadership, the top 70 people in our organization. There was a core group of 6 executives that interviewed every single person. Because if we get that top 70 right, that's going to be able to influence the rest of the organization in a more effective way. And so we took a lot of time and invested time, money, and assessments, and in time in interviewing to get the right people in place, because then you can let them go. If you get the right people in place, give them the right direction on it, they'll be able to handle that there. The one thing I think that we missed, quite honestly, that you got to be careful not to underclub is training. And that's training people and kind of helping them unlearn if you're changing processes, if you're integrating things. This is how we always used to do it. So we changed out our entire IT platform that runs the whole company. We did that in a period of 18 months. The old system wasn't good, wasn't built for our business, but over the years, people developed their little workarounds, right? I know how to work within this crummy system, and I cut and paste, and I know how to do this. Now you've introduced this new eloquent system, but now I've got to learn something new, and I've got to unlearn. I got to stop doing the stuff that I was doing before because that made me successful. And really taking the time to unlearn, and learn on the new and train people, and not just the one time, okay, we did it on the system. Come back 2 weeks later. Now that you've been working on it, do you understand it? Come back a month later. Okay. And we underclubbed that, to be honest with you. And I think companies want to move on quickly. And I think you've got to take the time to do that right. And I think those are some of the key lessons learned on transformation that I've experienced.
What about you personally? Because whenever I have these conversations, everyone talks about it from a business perspective. What did you learn personally, Mike? Because it's not easy, as an individual, as a dad, as a husband, it takes its toll.
It does.
What advice would you give to other CHROs?
Well, I mean, it's kind of like the cobbler's kids going without shoes, and idea. You got to find somebody that you can confide in. In our roles, we are the ones everybody's coming into to say, hey, close the door. Is it safe? I just talked to you, and the CEO just says, Mike, I got to tell you how frustrated I am. And say whatever you want to say. It's only staying in here. Where does the HR person go to have those conversations? It's usually not within the company. Usually, it may be with your CEO. Usually, that's about, in my experiences, if you have a good relationship with CEO, or you have a colleague, a similar CHRO in some other company that you can have, these kind of discussions with. So I think, you have to have that, because you don't have all the answers, right? And everybody's kind of oftentimes looks to you to have that. I play guitar, so musical family and whatever. So my guitar playing and my acquisition of new songs has really improved during this pandemic, because that's my release, right? So I have to have a release, because if I can't go out, and we can't go out for dinner, and now finally in the Chicago area, the weather's getting nice so we can go outside. But when it was cold and rainy and whatever, my release was music. And so the upside of all of this is my guitar playing's gotten better with that. So I think making sure you have those outlets, you're taking care of yourself. It's harder for people to physically take care of themselves, whether it's through exercise or those kinds of things. But if you don't take the time, and if you're always on, it's just going to drain your battery, and then you're no good for everybody else.
Yeah, I'm trying to encourage a lot of the CHROs to speak, or HR leaders in general, or every leader, to be honest, I'm speaking to you at the moment, no matter who you are, you take care of yourself first. Because if I can't take care of Chris, I can't take care of my wife, my daughter, my business, my team, as well. And we always end up doing it the other way around. And especially right now, a lot of the HR leaders I'm speaking to are working 24/7.
I know.
Most of them have global roles who we work with in our community. They all of a sudden it gets to 5 p.m. then the US wakes up.
Yeah.
Right. Or in your case, another part of the world wakes up, and it's just never ending.
I know.
And you need to and set some boundaries because I made that mistake in the first few weeks, and I paid the price as well. I had a lot of anxiety. Even my back, was just so sore from sitting still all day. There's so many different things came from it. So it's super important.
It is.
Well, before we wrap up, Mike, I'm going to kind of jump into our quick fire round, which I ask each guest. So I'm going to ask you 5 questions, and you have no longer than 30 seconds to give us some amazing answers. You ready?
Give me an answer. I don't know if it'll be amazing, but
yeah. What was the sort of number one thing that was holding you back from becoming a senior HR executive?
I started in training and development, and the early days, some of the HR leaders I saw, I didn't feel were connected with the business. And so I didn't want to do that. So I wanted to make sure, if you're going to do this job, understand the business and know the business, and just don't be an HR wonk following policies. So my early days, that I didn't have some good, role models that I aspired to. Then I found some, and I said, that's exactly what I want to do.
Very cool. What's the best piece of business advice you've ever received?
Understand the flow of money and understand how your company makes money. And if you can understand that, then you'll understand what levers to pull, what issues to drive from a HR leadership or perspective. If you understand that, then you're able to have real impact on the organization.
Mm-hmm. What's one book did you recommend to our audience, and why?
The 5 Dysfunctions of a Team, I think, is a good one. It just I'm literally just looking across at my bookshelf, and there it is. So, but I think that's a good one as you think about teams and culture.
Yeah, right now it's a very important book to read then.
Yeah.
Given what we're talking about. Could you share some internet resources you use personally to keep up to date with current events or continue your own learning? What's on the web browser? What's the sort of go-to apps you use or websites that you kind of visit to keep up to date with current events?
So I think there are various news, New York Times, Wall Street Journal, health-related modern healthcare to make sure we understand the organization. Harvard Business Review, just more from a research perspective. Those are kind of as I pop up in the morning, those are the things that I'm looking at, and kind of browse a few TV channels to get a breadth of perspectives on the news there.
Last question. What's one thing about your business that you're most excited about?
You know what? The thing I'm most excited about is the impact that we have on patients' lives on a daily basis, and the stories that we hear about our phenomenal nurses and clinicians and the impact that they have on people at their most vulnerable when they're not healthy. Whenever you're having a bad day, you read one of those stories and it makes you feel great about what you do and what you're contributing to an organization like that.
Mm-hmm. Talking about a powerful why.
Exactly.
It doesn't get much stronger than that when it comes to saving lives.
Absolutely.
As well. So look, well, thank you so much, Mike. It's been a pleasure.
Enjoyed it, Chris.
Having you on the show. I really appreciate you taking the time out to join us.
Absolutely.
Before we wrap up, if there's sort of one parting piece of advice you'd give everyone, what would that be? Obviously around the focus of today's show. And the other is, where can they connect with you? If they want to reach out, say hello to you, where's the best place for them to do that?
So the best place to reach me is mike.rood@optioncare.com. That's the company email there. So that would be the best way to reach out to me. And I guess just one piece of advice I'd give, particularly in these times right now, listen and be patient. And if we can do that, I think we'll get through a lot of this craziness right now.
Yeah. And then, so you sure you want the email there? Not LinkedIn? Yeah, I always see everyone on LinkedIn, they go, Chris, I didn't realize my inbox was going to get so many emails after the show. So I'm warning you now whilst we're live.
That's fine.
All right, that's fine. All right, well, there you heard it here. So, no problem. Well, thanks everyone who tuned in today on LinkedIn. It's a pleasure to have you all with us here, and thank you for your questions. Sorry if we didn't get through to all of them. We'll Mike, I'll ask Mike to check in on LinkedIn as well, see if he catch up some of those questions. And, apart from that, Mike, thanks again for joining us, and I wish you all the best until next week.
You too.
All right, see ya. Bye.
Take care.